Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Good to see you, John. Hi, Leah. We got Jimmy here, Adam, Ted, Darren, Darren and Deb. All right. So I'm gonna jump right in. Um, and I didn't even tell Jen, but we have oh, hey, Jimmy. Before we get started, I wanted to see if you wanted to share how it went with your church group and the estate planning thing that happened.
Went very well. And so that all of you know, our church hosted a small event for folks interested in estate planning to gather. And Angela gave me a handout to share, which, showed her practice name and, LGBTQ estate planning. And it was interesting. The handouts I brought, people are like, oh, that's for the gay people. I'm like, no, that's for every people. It just happens to be a list that we are going to share with our straight friends and allies, and you would benefit from it. And the amazing thing, Angela, is at my table, I was the table host. Um, Husband and wife came out to me that her son and his partner have been avoiding marriage because they're uncomfortable, but they feel unprotected. So I gave her the handout, and then she started sharing all these stories about, that this couple lives in Denver, pretty accepting, but they don't feel comfortable. My husband and I just moved from Greeley, Colorado to Fort Collins, Colorado, because it felt unsafe where
Yeah,
we were living. And so from your prior seminars, about if you're able, find that safer place. And we took that advice.
within the same state. Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
have to leave per
just a
se. Yeah,
different county with a much better HRC rating.
right.
Um, so the presentation went great. We appreciate the tools, and it was really good. It was really a good
Awesome.
conversation.
Um, yeah, a few things there. When I did the Caravan of Hope, I actually got a lot of flack from folks online. Gotta love folks online. Lots of opinions on. But why are you going to Colorado? Colorado's so blue. Why, you're in Texas, and then, why bother with Colorado? And actually, the day that we were in Colorado, the governor had just changed laws around gender marker changes, and I was with a woman and her trans child, and the child was young and was like, "Oh, we're in Colorado, all is well." And the mom was like, "I don't think you're very aware about what's happening in Colorado and how red, Denver is Denver." And the whole point is, I would always park the caravan somewhere safe, and folks from surrounding areas come to the caravan. I always think of Matthew Shepard in Laramie, Wyoming. If my big old gate out 32-foot RV drove into Laramie, right, would it have been safe for Matthew Shepard to hop on the Caravan of Hope? No, he would have outed himself right then and there. So you go to places sort of adjacent, if you will, make it known where you're going to be, and then people from those red counties. But yeah, I mean, Colorado, obviously, like Pennsylvania, has become purple, but I feel like a lot of people just in Colorado think blue and super safe, and that there's not, and it's just not the case. And that's true really of every state. I mean, there's buckets, but more so where there's counties that are super red, and Colorado has that, like Pennsylvania, they call Pennsyltucky. Um, the other piece that you said that I honed in on was, marriage and not being comfortable. A lot of folks don't realize, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm looking at Christopher and his husband entrepreneurs, Jen entrepreneur, a lot of LGBT, Allie, newly entrepreneur, a lot of LGBTQ folks um, will gravitate towards being an entrepreneur because you don't have an HR company, if you will, and folks you need to answer to, and water cooler conversations and discrimination and all of the things. It's not why I became an entrepreneur, but especially in the 90s and 2000s, a large percent of folks who were discriminated against and fired for being gay had no other option but to go into business for themselves in some way, shape, or form. And so with marriage comes privilege, absolutely zero power. That woman's son didn't feel protected, and marriage wouldn't have given him that anyways. Right. And then to get married means you have to tell your HR, tell your company, because now things change with, your 401k, ERISA laws are different when you're married and, um, all of the things. And so getting married means to out yourself in ways that if you're somewhere where it's not safe, um, and you don't necessarily need the financial privileges that come with it, because a lot of folks will get married for health insurance or for Social Security survivor benefits. Like there are fiscally advantageous reasons, but if you don't need them, it definitely has outs you in a lot of ways, when you're a W-2 employee that works for someone. So um, well, good job, Jimmy. You did the agenda's work. The gay agenda. There you go.
Made an ally friend.
Exactly, exactly. I'm actually going to be speaking at a church. Just the word like gives me, like I was raised Catholic and I always yawn when I'm in church and I Googled that, like why, and it's because apparently like my nervous system calms down so quickly that you yawn to catch up. So there's something super calming about it, and yet psychologically, like I'm like, church, but there's a lot of, very open Episcopalian, Unitarian. And so one of my clients is a deacon, and in November I'll be doing a talk, and it'll be interesting to go into a church. I got to make sure not to say the F-bomb. All right, so we'll jump right in. Let's see. We're going to talk about Trump. If you got the email, we're going to talk about whether Trump can get a third term, whether he would be or could act as president in 2028. And based on my analysis, initially I was like, no, not without, a clear rule of law violation, some sort of power grab, mutiny in the streets. But the research that I did, and I came to this from a Bannon interview that I saw with The Economist, where he basically was like, tell me where in the 22nd Amendment it says that he can't. We will unveil all of the ways. Like, I kid you not, Trump will be president in 2028, and we will unveil all of the ways that that is legally possible here soon. And so I want to get ahead of it, and was curious, what are those things that they're going to unveil to us? And they're definitely there. Let me share my screen. Let me see. Hold on one second. Let me stop sharing. I don't know that that's the right one. Yeah, I guess so. I thought there were 80 slides. Lucky for you, there's only 73. All right, so Trump. And so rebrand. That's what I was going to say earlier. As far as what I didn't tell Jen, I spent way too long this weekend because I'm not a designer, and this design probably sucks too. But at least it's not black. I don't know about you guys, but the topics were really depressing, and then the black PowerPoints were really depressing me on top of it. And the orange and Halloween. I do love Halloween, but it's been bothering me for months, and I never did anything about it. And I saw this podcast about what do you tolerate? And that's going to be one of our life hacks at the end of this. Name 100 things that you tolerate. And I've been tolerating the friggin' PowerPoint design in these LQAs. So I did something about it. But like I said, I don't know that it's all that much better, but at least it's not black. Okay, so like I said, I went back and did some research. I don't know if you guys remember, in addition to this, he said at one point while campaigning, "Don't worry, we won't need election. I won't need to campaign soon. For the next 4 years, you won't have to vote, elections, all of the things." So just sort of piecing together random tidbits here and there. Not joking about a third term. Would JD Vance pass the baton to Trump? Well, that's one of the ways he responded. Bannon in particular, why, in that interview that I saw with The Economist, explain how he can do that based on the text of the 22nd Amendment. And he said, show me where it makes it clear in the 22nd Amendment. We plan on using that as our main reason, along with the 12th Amendment. We'll get into that. So Trump is going to be president in 2028, he said. He said it's the will of the people. Many different alternatives, and there are about 5 different routes. I mean, I see this happening. And then he said, and our plan will be laid out to you at the appropriate time. And we'll define all of those terms in laying out that plan. So one thing jurisprudentially, legally, to note with that is when he said this, to define all of those terms as the ways in which we'll lay out our plans, and in doing so define all of those terms. To me, that means a textualist strategy. So when you read a statute, when you read an amendment, when you read anything that the legislature, Constitution, has written, you can do so in many different ways. One of the ways is from a textualist standpoint. Scalia was a textualist. This particular Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett, is a textualist, Kavanaugh textualist. So the majority of this SCOTUS panel are not all textualists, but the ones that would vote, for this, they would apply a textualist strategy. They know that. So they're even laying out their plans already, in my opinion, choosing a textualist interpretation of the amendments in order to lay out their plan. You may have saw this is also what made me fast forward. I had a few options on what we were going to talk about today, even though I don't remember what they all were. Jen's going to remind me. But something happened a few days ago where he posted on Trump Social again an AI generated thing of him as president in 2028, like campaign poster type things. I didn't realize that 2028 Trump merchandise has been like legitimately sold through the campaign, because there's also Obama, 2028 merchandise being sold. Like, just because these merch things are being sold doesn't mean they're being sold from the campaign itself. The Obama merch, is not being sold by the DNC. But official legitimate Trump merchandise has been sold for almost a year. Continues to display the imagery. The Trump store has the merch on it. The product description literally tells buyers, rewrite the rules. Another thing that I kept seeing in some of the interviews or people talking about this was some folks are like, why are we talking about this in 2028? Like, why are we talking about this now? Why is he posting that now? A few different reasons. One, it feels a lot less shocking and a lot less of a opportunity, or for a January 6th rising where like we're the ones that are mutinying in the streets kind of thing, where it doesn't just pop up on us and all of a sudden he refuses to let go of power, stays on for a third term, looks like a dictatorship, and then there's people mutinying in the streets. So the more it's normalized now, then the more it's just like, oh, we knew this was going to happen, and it stays in the headlines for a little bit. The other reason is midterm elections. A lot of these routes will depend on how the House votes on certain things, the Speaker of the House at that point in time. And so, depending on these midterm elections as well as immediately after the election, right, then the rewriting of the rules will depend on who's in power. So these midterm elections, as far as this particular topic, I don't think anyone is tying those two together. So the constitutional route that clearly works for them, that they are in no way going to investigate, in my opinion, is just rewrite amend the Constitution, amend Article 5. Two-thirds of both houses and of both the House and Congress has to propose it. Three-fourths of the states have to ratify it. Extremely high political threshold. It's just not even worth in my opinion, their time in investigating it. However, they're covering all their bases. Proposed amendment has already been, and I guess I missed this, it happened immediately in January of 25. Proposed an amendment to Article 22 saying, that Trump is uniquely situated for 2 terms, non-consecutive. So it would still prevent an election after 2 consecutive terms, but not the way that he has it. So there is an amendment out there that would allow for someone who didn't serve like Obama, twice consecutively to then have a third. But there's an amendment already proposed for over a year and a half that is in the works, but not going to go anywhere, and not the conventional legal route that I think Bannon is signaling. So refresher course and con law was not my favorite course in law school by any way. I mean, stick a pen in my eye, boring. Maybe the First Amendment kept my attention, but I needed a refresher in all of this. So 22nd Amendment, no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. Okay, now we're going to parse the words because we're going to pretend to be textualists. A textualist can only use the words in the text. It cannot interpret. It can't use the intention behind it, the legislative intention or anything. It can only use the words on the page, because the thought behind a textualist is if they meant something else, they would have said something else. Period. End of story. They meant what they said. Choose every word, choose it carefully, and that's that. So no person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice. Doesn't say that no person can serve more than twice. And it doesn't say that no person can hold the office of president more than twice. It does not expressly prohibit a twice elected president from becoming president through other means like succeeding. And that drafting is a massive loophole that I think they walk right through. So the word they're focusing on, by the way, aren't this PowerPoint awesome? I got boxes. I'm pretty impressed with myself. Okay. The word they're focusing on is elected. Election is obviously only one of the routes. I forget that. Oh, the designated survivor. If you ever saw that show, Designated Survivor, where like blows up and everybody important dies during the State of the Union, right? So there are many ways. He was an acting president, and so we'll talk about the acting president, and I think that's the route that they use. So we have election, we have succession. Vice president becomes president, then he dies and or resigns for some reason. Nixon, all the things, then vice president becomes president, and there's no new election. So these 2 boxes, the succession and the acting as president, are the 2 that I think they go with. And then contingent election. No one reaches an electoral college majority. The House chooses amongst the top 3, 1 vote per state. 22nd Amendment, again, in the text of the 22nd Amendment, uses 3 different verb choices in the same one. The amendment does not use 1 word for presidential service. In a single provision, it uses 3. I don't think that that's accidental. So it refers to a person who has held the office. It separately refers to a person who has acted as president, and then later limits how many times that person can serve through elections. So drafters use three different verbs, and the amendment itself recognizes that acting as president is legally different than being elected as president. And that's a designated survivor show. He acted as president, Speaker of the House, and everybody died, and he had to act as president. He was next in line in succession, but he wasn't elected. The 22nd Amendment actually says acted as president. So the second sentence, no person who has held the office of president or acted as president. Right there, together, separated by commas. This is what a textualist would look at. By separating as by commas, you're saying that these two things are can be completely different. Held the office as of president or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the office of president more than once. No person who has held the office or acted for more than 2 years to which some other person was elected can then be elected to that office of president more than once. So the amendment expressly contemplates a person acting as president during someone else's term. And that being different, and that person can then act as president moving forward. It then regulates how many future elections that person can win. So the amendment knows how to regulate acting service, but never forbids a twice elected president from acting as president again. So you can be twice elected and act. The structural responses language, the language exists to calculate future election eligibility of the acting president. So, and then the rest of section 1, the sentence, I didn't see anybody quote, shall not prevent any person who may be holding the office of president or acting president, shall not prevent any person who may be acting as president during the term within which this article becomes operative from holding the office of president or acting as president during the remainder of that term. So shall not prevent the person acting as president. Trump starts acting as president in 28. Shall not prevent Trump from holding the office of president or acting as president during the remainder of 2028. It's written right here. They use the 22nd Amendment to say that he can. I read it to say that. It was a Truman carve out. It let one sitting president finish without the new limit applying, and without the new limit applying. And that's where the autocracy, if you're seeing a lot of Rachel Maddow in your newsfeed recently, and autocracy and the death to democracy, and about 2/3 of the world right now are under some sort of form of authoritarian or autocracy. Can never say that. And if someone is acting as president, when does that end? And how does that end? And then does that become that he just continues to act as president? But this amendment did not overlook him being able to act as president. It simply regulated how it comes to be. So then the 12th Amendment comes in. So the 12th Amendment is like everyone, The Economist and Rachel Maddow and everybody that I have been researching then says, okay, but however you read the 12th Amendment, or I'm sorry, however you read the 22nd Amendment, it doesn't matter because the 12th Amendment renders him ineligible to be one of those folks that could potentially act as president. No person constitutionally ineligible for the office of president shall be eligible to be that of vice president. Okay, now The vice president piece is because what we're thinking, me, by we, I mean me, is that one of the easiest routes is that Vance runs with Trump as VP. And then on January 21st, he resigns. Vance does, and then Trump acts as president. So one of the ways to counter that is, well, he can't run as VP. He's ineligible to be VP. And that's not the only way to get there, but there are a few more legal loopholes or hurdles and like opportunities for litigation that the far right would have to go through if they don't go this VP, vice president baton passing route. And I've also been looking at all of the ways that he could become president in 2028, and I'm choosing the most egomaniacal. He wants to run. He wants to campaign. He doesn't want to let two other people campaign and then go these other routes, have the Speaker of the House appoint him, and all of these ways that we're going to go through. He wants to campaign. He wants to wear his hat. He wants to speak. He wants to do all of the things, right? The only way to do that, the only way out of these 5 routes for him to be able to campaign and have his, Trump 2028 hats and all of the things is for the VP president route, this route. So the 12th Amendment governs presidential and vice presidential election. The last sentence is the biggest obstacle: ineligible. Everyone is focusing on ineligible and what that means, but it doesn't, again, it's all about word choice. My mentor always said, words create your world. Words create your world, even from a life hack standpoint. Why do you take vitamins and supplements? Do you take them not to get sick, or do you take them to stay healthy? 2 completely different ways to explain the exact same thing, why you take vitamins in the morning. Not to get sick, which is depressing and will ultimately just keep you in a sick, energetic, whatever. So words create your world. If I were a judge, if I were a Supreme Court, I also would be a textualist. I would take an interpretation, but ultimately it does not say that anyone barred from being elected president is automatic barred from being elected president is automatically ineligible. What it talks about as far as ineligibility are the things that I think I talk about it a future slide here, that you must be natural born, at least 35, and a resident of 14 years, as far as qualifications go. So the central question, is Trump constitutionally ineligible to be president? Or is Trump only constitutionally ineligible to be elected president? Could someone be barred from being elected president and still be constitutionally capable of acting as president? And I think the answer is yes to that. So being ineligible, these are the eligibility. The loophole, the 22nd Amendment limits his future election without changing his underlying eligibility to hold office now. He meets these 3 constitutional qualifications. So how the 12th and the 22nd come together, right? So opponents, us, if Trump can't constitutionally be elected president again, that means he's constitutionally ineligible to be president. Therefore, the 12th Amendment bars him from vice presidency, because you can't be vice president. If you're barred from ultimately being president and the successor to being president is vice president, then and you're barred, the same things that bar you from being president would bar you from being able to run as vice president. So eligibility and electability have to be read together, is what the opponents are saying. Pro-Trump 28, Article 2 defines eligibility for the office: natural born, 35, a resident of 14 years. The 22nd Amendment separately restricts being elected only. Therefore, Trump is eligible to hold office. He just can't be elected. The people can't elect him directly. And then Congress's own constitution The annotated flags the problem. So Constitution annotated is a version of the Constitution, is Congress's official Constitution research resource. Again, textualists won't go there. Textualists don't care to research what they were thinking or the interpretation or anything. It's just what ended up being put in writing and agreed to. But this flags the problem going way back. Its discussion of the 22nd Amendment acknowledges that the amendment, by its terms, only bars election. It notes that this language could permit a twice elected president to succeed after becoming vice president. It then identifies the 12th Amendment as an unresolved obstacle. So this is all in notes that the legislature during this time, as these amendments were being voted on, were saying, okay, that's great, but then there's this potential loophole. So there's an actual constitutional ambiguity that ultimately has never been litigated. And it's clearly an ambiguity because it's in the official research resources that they identified it decades ago, but it's never come to be an actual problem. So we've talked about this. Textualists will absolutely read in favor of Trump. So the 10-year maximum understanding. So this is also something in the research resource. The ratification era reporting repeatedly describes 10 years as the maximum possible presidential service. So you have a vice president could succeed with 2 years remaining in another president's term. That person could potentially win 2 more terms, 4-year elections, equaling 10 years. So the ratifiers understood a ceiling, letting someone return indefinitely as acting president defeats this 10-year ceiling. But again, this is the historical answer to their textual argument. The ceiling that can be re-entered forever is ultimately not a ceiling. So we'd have to address this 10-year maximum, but it's not written in the amendment. It's only written in the research resources as an understanding. And a textualist would say if there was a 10-year maximum, then that needed to be put in writing. If you have a rule, make it a rule. So Trump acting as president. The theory doesn't necessarily claim another presidential term at all. Another person can be elected president or no president may qualify. Meanwhile, Trump exercises the powers and duties. He does so pursuant to a succession or inability mechanism. There is no body and not an election. So he never won a third term, is true. President and acting president are not the same constitutional thing. The Constitution distinguishes between permanent succession from temporary exercise of powers under the 25th Amendment. In some circumstances, the VP can become president. We've seen that previously. And under the 20th Amendment and succession statutes, other people may also act as president. They're all different constitutional categories with different triggers, different durations, and ultimately potentially different litigation. But the Constitution itself creates this is key. The Constitution itself creates presidential power without necessarily having to have a presidential election. Bannon's interview seemed to suggest that he would just anoint himself, sort of what we saw, before Jan 6 uprising, where he just wouldn't let go of power. That's not a thing, in my opinion. I think this crew that he has surrounding himself are much more strategic and brilliant, for lack of a better word, and they're not going to go that sort of barbaric, like, I'm king and I'm not stepping down, I'm anointing myself acting president. And I just don't think it's going to be that crude and crass, given that there's actual constitutional routes available to him and we'll get into the other ones again, in my opinion, less likely, but still there. So how Trump gets into the line of succession: vice president, the Speaker of the House, chosen by the House. The Constitution does not expressly require the Speaker to be a sitting member of Congress. So he could become appointed the Speaker of the House, chosen by the House, hence midterms. Okay, so again, how midterms play for the next like 20 some odd slides. A lot of this is all about cabinet member 2 and 3, all about what the House and or Congress votes. So midterm elections, super, super important. So the vice president route, Vance runs, Trump's the VP, they win, Vance becomes president, resigns, and Trump succeeds. He would become president. He didn't win. He didn't get elected. Again, 12th Amendment is the problem that they're going to have to face. There are going to be lawsuits around this. So the 12th Amendment. Trump can't actually use this route unless someone, the Supreme Court, finds that he can constitutionally serve as VP. So that's the ineligible versus electable debate, and that will just have to be litigated. The Conan argument. So University of Georgia con law professor examined this issue right before Trump 1.0, concluded that a twice elected president may become, I mean, this is just a law professor, but one of the most well-respected con law, along with Dershowitz, who also provided his own, they wrote a book on it and hand delivered it to Trump in the Oval Office as, hey, here's your roadmap to becoming president in 2028. But this guy concluded that a twice elected president can become, regardless of consecutive or non-consecutive, twice elected president may become vice president through, and he argued this could happen through election or appointment. And he further concluded that the person could succeed from VP to president and then serve the remainder of that particular term. The appointment version of things, Trump wouldn't have to run as VP. I literally just don't see him wanting to not run, to not campaign, to not be out there in public and, you know, making speeches and whatever. But maybe his health will prevent him. Maybe, you know, his inability, like there's real things going on from a health perspective there. And so who knows, maybe he does actually sit it out because it's not in anyone's best interest to have him out there falling asleep, you know, while standing up and trying to give a speech. But he wouldn't have to run. He, you know, allows a president to fill a vacant vice president seat. The president nominates a new vice president. The majority of both the House and the Senate must confirm. Trump could be appointed VP. Then the president resigns. You see all these loopholes here. Like the further we go, other than a Vance Trump ticket, it gets rather convoluted, not unconstitutional in my opinion, and not undoable, but a lot more options for lawsuits. And we'll talk about the lawsuits and when they should be filed. And again, we're only 26, but on a more serious note, Congress's own constitutional commentary, again, just, you know, notes to their own constitution, recognizes the ambiguity. The 12th Amendment gives opponents a very strong structural textual response. There is zero public evidence, however, that Vance has agreed to resign or participate in any of this. So obviously Vance going along with all of this is a must, but I don't see why he wouldn't. The speaker route, the House chooses its own speaker. Constitutionally speaking, no pun intended, the House can choose whoever it wants. Doesn't have to be a sitting member of Congress. Historically, that has never happened. The speaker has always been a member for the history of the United States, but we have unprecedented things all throughout for the last 2 years. So a Republican House could theoretically choose Donald Trump as speaker. He would then enter the statutory presidential line of succession, which is now after the VP, though. So this creates a route to power, but after president, after vice president. So Presidential Succession Act, we have the Speaker, first in statutory line of succession, President pro tempore, and then cabinet officers. The Speaker route requires 2 vacancies, so again, it's getting more convoluted. We need death, resignation, removal, inability, or failure to qualify, now in 2 different posts. Another problem with a non-member speaker, the House says the speaker doesn't have to be a member. However, the Presidential Succession Act was drafted assuming, just assuming, never said that it had to be, but assumed that the speaker would be one. So it says the speaker must resign as speaker and as a representative in Congress, because it just assumed that it would be a member before acting. A not Trump wouldn't have a House seat to resign from. So again, this creates a statutory interpretation, ambiguity. Why would it have said you both have to do this and that if they didn't have to be? But again, it doesn't say that they do have to be a member of the House. I mean, these are ambiguities in the Constitution that nobody ever noticed because we've never gotten to this point in anything. But but there's serious loopholes, and the notes all throughout decades ago, as these amendments were being enacted, the notes clearly, like, they thought about worst case scenario. They always thought about a king, right? The democracy was born on, there's no such thing as a philosopher king, because a philosopher doesn't want to be king, and a king just wants power. A philosopher just wants truth, no, not power. And so there was somewhere in between. And ultimately, they thought about all these worst case scenarios if they were able to deduce the ambiguities that we're now seeing, but for some reason didn't think to resolve them. So the House could choose him. This route avoids Trump having to receive an electoral college majority. No presidential candidate receives the majority of the election, then moves to the House of Representatives under the 12th Amendment. The Constitution says the House shall choose the president. The argument is that Trump, again, is not being elected president a third time. He's being chosen by the House. So this would be a contingent election. The House doesn't simply vote by individual member. It chooses among the top 3 presidential candidates. Each state delegation gets 1 vote. California gets 1 vote, even Wyoming. Doesn't matter the number. I mean, they're trying to change this, but electoral votes that each state has, or how big the state is, each state just gets 1 vote. This is one of Alan Dershowitz's theories. Alan Dershowitz has written a book about how Trump can get 1 more term, delivered it to him in 2025 in the Oval Office. One scenario involves electors withholding, so the electoral college withholding votes so that nobody obtains a majority. Then the matter goes to Congress, and then Congress would select rather than elect the president. So we have a normal presidential election, the way that we do every other presidential election. And then when we get to the electoral college piece, they withhold. Nobody obtains a majority. It goes to I mean, I just don't see this happening. Again, mutiny in the streets, and also a lot of litigation potential and options for litigation. He still has to be one of the top 3 candidates. A contingent election doesn't allow the House to choose just anyone. Trump has to be amongst one of the 3 who got the highest number of electoral votes. And again, campaigning wise, he can't campaign. Are electoral votes for a twice elected president constitutionally valid? Or does the violation occur only if those votes actually resulted in his election? Just seems too convoluted and far. And again, the litigation that would ensue, but the timing of the litigation is super important. Now, all of this, these last couple of routes hinge on chosen versus elected. The argument depends on treating constitutional verbs as and I think that they do view them as distinct. If they only meant elected, they would have only used elected. If they wanted chosen and elected to be the same, they would have just used elected. So clearly, chosen versus elected is meant to be two different things. The National Archives, however, and again, not the amendment, but in the National Archives, someone wrote the House elects, the president not chooses. But the 12th Amendment says the House chooses. I mean, if they screwed up their words, here we are. The amendment is the amendment, and the Supreme Court can only be asked to interpret what's there. But so another option, nobody qualifies on Jan 20. I don't think that happens, but it's a possibility. 20th Amendment deals with failures around Inauguration Day. President-elect fails to qualify for some reason. That person acts until, and again, this is the designated survivor TV show option where a bomb blew up. I just don't see this happening. Right? Everyone dies. Nobody qualifies on Jan 20. Trump comes out like a phoenix rising from the ashes. I will be your president. I just don't see that happening. But, and again, two different, it would have to be a ticket of Vance and someone else campaigning. They both stand down. Trump becomes president. It does alleviate can Trump be vice president litigation? And again, if he's not fit to be running around and campaigning, so maybe, but then both people would have to stand down on Jan 20, and then he moves in. Oh, going the wrong way. Why acting president, in my opinion, is the most attractive route for them to go. Trump never has to prove he was lawfully elected. He never has to defend a proposition that the constitutional text appears to foreclose. The legal fight is much narrower, less hoops to have to fight through and jump through. Like the question still remains, can a twice elected former president exercise presidential powers temporarily under an independent mechanism? So Trump violates the 22nd Amendment is a headline that causes mutiny in the street. Officer temporarily exercises powers under the 20th Amendment. You don't even know what that means. People skim right over that. Officer temporarily exercising powers under the 20th Amendment also means Trump becomes president. Two very different ways to word it. You change the question, you change the case. Right? There's a quote, Wayne Dyer, change the way you look at things and the things you look at change. Right? So case A, Donald Trump elected president a third time. They still have a textual argument here, 3 verbs, 1 provision. It fails because whatever else the section does, elected, plainly covers the third election. Drafting history, ratification era, understanding of the Truman carve-out, I think that loses. Case B, otherwise Article 2, qualified official temporarily exercising presidential powers under the 20th Amendment. No court has answered this. Congress's own commentary concedes the ambiguity. Genuinely open question for anyone to walk through, even validly. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? So we still have 3 issues: eligibility, purpose, like why? No one actually died. There is no emergency. It's not designated survivor. There wasn't a big bomb, right? So could just the purpose, the fact that they're using this ambiguity to get around amendments and Constitution, is that an argument that we could make to the Supreme Court that this is just a loophole? And is it fair and democratic to use a constitutional loophole that, yes, agreed, exists, but for an improper purpose, i.e. not let go of power? And then the duration. When does this end? It was meant to be a bridge. It was meant to be a bridge. Designated survivor. Everybody blew up. There's no president. It was meant to be a bridge until, as soon as possible, we have a new election, so that the people decide the president. It was meant to be, this acting presidential theory was meant to be a bridge in a government genuine emergency, designated survivor, everything blew up. not meant to be a loophole for someone to get a 4-year term and or indefinitely act as president. When does it end? Could temporary become permanent? So I'm going to run through some of these because we have a lot of slides left, but only 10 minutes. But ultimately, I think you get the overall argument. The Senate actually considered successive terms. Every single theory has these things in common. None of them says the 22nd Amendment doesn't apply in some way, shape, or form. Every single one of these narrows that what the amendment is actually regulating. Elected is completely different and separate from becoming. Becoming is separate from being chosen. Chosen is separate from acting. Eligibility is separate from electability. Words create your world. Every single one of these words is different in how they're used. 22nd Amendment never says candidate. The amendment does not expressly say Trump can't announce a campaign. It simply says he can't seek a party nomination. Does not expressly say that his name can't appear on a ballot. It says he can't be elected to president. Enforcement, again, when does it end? The timing question. When should Trump announce? When should he file a primary ballot? When he wins? When the Republican Party nominates him? When the voters cast ballots? When the presidential electors vote? When Congress votes? What's the timing of all of this? State ballot access would be the first major fight. So presidential ballots are administered by the states. So again, the VP, not as president, but as vice president, he'd have to be on a ballot. And so then this immediately puts Trump v. Anderson at the center of the fight. We just dealt with this. So that would immediately put the Supreme Court case Trump v. Anderson at the center. So Trump v. Anderson, Colorado, just talking about Colorado being red. Colorado removed Trump from its presidential primary ballot under Section 3. They said, nope, we don't even want him to be an option in our state. The Supreme Court reversed. States could not independently decide who gets to be a federal candidate. So Trump will rely heavily on Trump v. Anderson to any fight on him being on a ballot in any particular state. And that's how it helps him. What Trump v. Anderson, out of all the things that we've just discussed, what it does not decide. Anderson interpreted Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The case didn't decide the ambiguities in the 22nd Amendment that would still need to be litigated. And it did not decide whether a twice elected president may appear on a ballot. So Trump has a great analogy, but not a controlling answer. Okay, and that's what's key is I see the Supreme Court saying he needs to go on the ballot until we resolve this. But that's one of the biggest issues. We'll skip the electoral. Is facts change while courts wait. Courts take time. Deciding something like this and going up to the Supreme Court takes time. So with every completed step, he gets on the ballot. While we figure out that goes up to the Supreme Court whether or not it's constitutional, right? It's hard to walk someone back from being on the ballot if they're already on the ballot. It's hard to walk someone back from acting as president if they're already acting as president. So facts change while we wait for the courts. Possession 9/10 of the law with everything. Okay, so legally disputed succession mechanism, if he's already in power. Oh, Jesus. That's how I would feel too if he were already in power. So they're asking the court to stop someone already exercising presidential authority. Okay, very hard to walk something like that back. SCOTUS could avoid the merits before power transfers. So the court could find a particular plaintiff lacks standing. Again, who sues? Who is the plaintiff before he actually becomes president? So, and that's not clear. This has never been litigated. So SCOTUS could punt for many different ways. They could punt based on the merits before the transfer of power. SCOTUS reaches the merits, Trump's best argument. The Constitution expressly distinguishes acting as president from being elected. The 22nd Amendment expressly uses both concepts in the same provision, and he's already acting as president in that moment. SCOTUS reaches the merits, and this is the strongest response, says the 12th Amendment requires every VP to be eligible for presidency. This is the strongest potential outcome. And Justice Kavanaugh has already described the rule as a maximum of 2 elected terms. So same, 2 elected terms only, not serving. So in that interview that all of this, is pretty much based on, Bannon asked the interviewer, define all of these terms. Define all of these terms in the 22nd Amendment for me. Elected, held office, acted as president, acting as president, term, eligible and chosen, becoming, acting as president as a title. And in doing so, in defining all of this, you're able to build the case of how being elected and acting as president is his language consistent with the theory that presidential authority can continue without a conventional third term election. Absolutely. Political mandate versus constitutional office. Bannon's rhetoric, divine will. Okay. Bannon's rhetoric treats Trump's authority as originating in popular mandate. I'm not paying any attention to this. The Supreme Court won't pay any attention to the political mandate versus constitutional, but there's still enough in Article 1 and Article 2 and in the amendments that do that. Again, we talked about this. Why talk about it so early? It normalizes it. That's what they're doing. They're doing all of their third term talk now because it helps to normalize it. And then even if no third term occurs, possibility of extending his leverage the way Elon Musk, like what was he? Right? Like imagine an Elon Musk in the next like presidential administration. So my ranking on how these from most likely is vice president through succession, or vice president and then succession. Nobody qualifies. They both stand down. The whole speaker, house, and the non-consecutive, I didn't even really go into it, but it's not a thing. So I feel like 3 and 4, just way too many legal loopholes. They're not going to want to do that, both from an ego perspective and a time perspective. It's 1 and 2. So again, what is their legal theory? What are they going to lay out? The theory is not Trump gets a third term. It's Trump continues exercising presidential power. Period. Trump will exercise presidential power. I think it's a great strategy. What they're doing, normalizing Trump 2028 now, long before we need a legal answer. Get everybody sort of used to it, if you will. Bannon even says that. Everybody needs to get acclimated to that. That's what he said. Trump's going to be president in 2028. And the sooner people get acclimated to that, the better. Like, and believe me, I hope I'm wrong. Again, midterms, right? What it actually controls. Huge. The timing of it all. Okay, seats in the House from 27 to 29, covering this time period. So anything having to do with needing a House vote, especially 3 and 4, or any legal, battles that come down the pike, this midterm election, more than anything, I'm going to be writing an article for Rewire, if you're familiar with Rewire, and it's about midterms and its legal impact on really LGBTQ folks, in particular trans folks, and sort of what we talked about at the last session, actually, with NSPM 7, and the budgets and but really midterms impact so much this coming year that every single person on here needs to vote. Biggest thing to watch moving forward is, again, words. Okay, the words that they're using. Let me go back. Don't focus on whether Trump says he's running. Listen for acting president. He'll be acting president. Listen for failure to qualify. Listen for the distinction, eligibility, and electability, and powers and duties of the office, which an acting president is allowed to live out and fulfill. So I think they're going to be extremely strategic with the words they use. And I'm sure they're going to try to get Trump to be strategic. He's going to screw it up. But as far as like his minions, he's just going to be like, I'm president, whatever he's going to say won't make sense. But as far as anything in writing and anything official, the words they use will be key. So bottom line, I don't see Trump as being a presidential nominee. Another Republican will. Trump's on the ticket as VP. 12th Amendment fights start ASAP. The ticket wins. Inauguration happens. Then the presidency is vacated and Trump exercises power. All right, we'll stop there. Let me look at the comments. Damn, that's terrifying. Yes. As I don't think he'll survive this term. Yeah. PowerPoint, 2 thumbs up. Yay. Thanks, Bill. Visually engaging. Thank you. Much better than the green or the black. And since one of the fears of a Trump MAGA-esque administration, this. So, yeah, great question. Great question. And obviously we only have an hour. Like, it was hard to get through this in an hour, and I'm sure was boring on some levels and feels repetitive, but bears repeating. Again, that's why constitutional laws like stick a pen in your eye boring, yet these things that you are learning when you're learning constitutional law, you don't realize how quickly, if things are left ambiguous, can turn into an autocratic and authoritarian government. So important. I mean, I feel like I need to go back and like go to Temple and visit my con law professor and give him a hug. Sorry for not paying attention or thinking this class was important in any way, shape, or form. I even got a master's of law in Chinese law and lived in Beijing for a while. And the joke there is no constitution. Like, why are we even learning Chinese law? And it's true, there is no constitution. And, and we made the jokes then, but like, it's a communist government and there is no constitution. And look what happens when there is no constitution. There's no room for the people to have a voice, to speak, for rule of law, all of the things. Anyways, to Ted's point, one of the things Bannon said is we have no choice. We have no choice for him to serve again in 2028 because we have to finish what we started. Right? Project 2025, check. And then we have the Heritage Foundation's 250-year manifesto. That now there's some cases happening in Texas around IVF and IUI. And I've seen an uptick in folks coming to me for confirmatory adoptions, and rightfully so, because that's on the chopping block. Surrogacy is banned in Italy, and it's going to be banned here per the Heritage Foundation. They've been calling for that for like 50 years, but they reinvigorated it in their manifesto in January. So yes, there are things that they need to finish in this next term that can only be finished if everybody stays as is and they continue to finish the things, right? Eradicating trans people, true genocide for transgender, diverse, non-binary folks, making sure they don't exist legally on paper, all of the things. So I met up with a lawyer friend of mine yesterday, and they work uh, for JAG and in the military, and we were talking about trans folks and everything that's happening there. And we were talking about, as far as documentation, and this goes for everyone within the LGBTQIA plus community, that how do you prevent a legal genocide is you document your existence in writing, right? And in documents. How do you prevent legally being erased? By making sure that you exist legally on paper in this country. Now, that can only take us so far. Obviously, start rounding people up, putting them in camps. We're not there, right? We're not there, but as to the extent documentation, and I say this about marriage and the woman that Jimmy spoke to and her son. At the end of the day, marriage gives you privilege, these documents give you power, and they've always protected us when our marriage can't. Your marriage is only recognized in 38 countries out of 195 that fly. 19% of the world recognizes people as married. Right? Like, so there are these things that people view as protection that's not actually protection. The only thing that, post election ICE workshops that I did for folks, the one document that we gave, that we did for restaurant owners, and the one document we gave for folks, undocumented people, were the durable power of attorney. 5 originals of the durable power of attorney. Who can act for you as you if you're unable, right? If the worst does happen and we can't get in touch with you and all of the things. So it's, documentation at the end of the day. And then as far as what more we can do as things evolve and devolve, and we'll see, we'll figure it out. But so that is my 2 cents on Trump 2028 legally, how it happens. This whole, all the rhetoric I'm seeing of 22nd Amendment bars it, and that's not a good argument. Anyone who's saying that hasn't, like, there are arguments that would prevent him from acting as president, but it is not the 22nd Amendment. And anyone saying that just hasn't done actual research. All right. So I will see you in 2 weeks. Happy Tuesday. High five, everyone. Love you all.